Hello. In this exciting video, we'll take a look at my C1 Consortium adventure. And if you have seen the video I did earlier, one of the 25 people who looked at it about the Consortium adventure, this is a new thing. So, as I noted in that video, I'm going to get a chance, apparently next week, to play in a campaign. A friend of mine who's running the Abomination Vaults, a conversion from Pathfinder to 5e, and I'll be playing a cleric in that campaign. And I've been writing adventures ahead of time because I'll be DMing after that. So finishing up the campaign I'm running today, the Rel campaign, finishing up the final R16 in that series, and then playing in the Abomination Vaults, and then of course there'll be the next campaign, which is my C1 Consortium Adventures, will be the start of that. Now, I'm creating this video in large part for myself, because I'm writing these and I'm hoping that it will be quite a while, months before I'll be running a game again. Because although I enjoy DMing, anybody who's DM'd, it's quite a bit of work. It's, because you have to be on the whole time, whereas players get to take, turns. And so one thing that's going to happen, of course, it'll be months and months and months from now, I hope. And so even though I wrote all this stuff myself, I will forget. Because as Merlin said in Excalibur, it is the doom of dungeon masters that they forget. And normally what I do, of course, is have them written out. And then, the day before, in the morning before, I'll go and read through it again so I'm prepared. Also, my professional job is a philosophy professor, and I'm one of those professors who is actually prepared. I show up to class, and I've got my notes and PowerPoints and everything ready to go. And I think DMing actually helped make me, as a side, a better professor, because when you're DMing, you've got to be ready to go if you want to run the game well, or really good at improvising. Same for being a professor. And because of the being a prepper in terms of adventures, I thought I'd give a try at having like a video version, something I could listen to while I'm cooking breakfast or doing something before the game, and try this out. And perhaps other people have the adventures as well, and find having a prep video useful. And so the first adventure in this series is C1 Consortium of Adventure. And the important stuff, when I go through and prep, I go through to get, I get my background in history, and I'm big on background in history to provide a setting for the adventure. And the players may not see all of this because it depends on what they research and get involved in, but I do like a context. And so in the case of this first adventure, kind of the setup for this campaign, and again, if you saw the earlier video, this is a bit of a repeat, is that usually I run these, story arcs, and the adventures connect together, creating at least, chapters connecting them, and then kind of an overarching, theme behind the campaign. And kind of the older method of running games for some people was you'd get whatever modules happen to be published, and you just run them. And so this is a less epic approach. Each adventure is mostly standalone, although there'll be some that are connected. And so, but I still like having kind of a background, not just, simply, adventure, no connection whatsoever. So came up with the idea of a consortium of adventure, which I talked about in that other video. The gist of it is that 3 organizations from my campaign world, the Eternal Library, which is dedicated to preserving knowledge across all the possible worlds, and the Magna Scala Magica, which I'm probably hardly mispronouncing, even though I made it up myself. It's that pseudo-Latin. They're as the name implies, they're scholars of magic, essentially wizards. The Eternal Library, again, is dedicated to preserving knowledge. So they would typically want adventurers to adventure to secure books and writings and other bits of knowledge, and bring them back to the library, or perhaps copies of them, to preserve it. And they have a very benevolent motivation, preservation of knowledge, not to hide it away and monopolize it, but to preserve it. And their guiding philosophy is sharing knowledge responsibly, because some of it, especially in fantasy worlds, can do like lots of damage. The Magnus Scholar Magica, that one a bit more flexible. Since they're wizards, their motivations of the various groups can range from benevolent, wishing to gather dangerous magic items, to keep them from being misused, or perhaps to gather magic items that are dangerous so they can misuse them. But they have a great deal of power and influence, so they can contribute to this consortium of adventure. The third group is the Order of White and Gold. From my campaign world, they're dedicated to essentially getting living creatures to accept constructs and undead, at least ones that are not out doing murder stuff. And they're very very focused on retrieving knowledge, and especially about constructs and undead, recovering and rescuing constructs and undead. And so these three groups, the Eternal Library dedicated to preserving knowledge, the College of basically of wizards dedicated to finding dangerous items, knowledge, etc., and the Order of White and Gold dedicated to rescuing constructs and undead. They've come together to form this consortium. And the goal of the consortium is to fund adventurers and organize them to achieve the goals of these three groups. And since, if you're running this yourself, you can decide on whether they're benevolent, or up to something, conspiracies going on, etc. Or you can just run everything, as Adventure of the Week with nothing behind them. But the consortium in the campaign I'm running provides the ability to have this, Adventure of the Week thing. They provide and fund the Adventurers Guild, not original name, but that provides a means for transportation, provides a means of, the characters getting gear, selling their items. It's basically a plot convenience device. Like, how do we get to this place? Oh, the consortium has, teleportation, circles, teleportation gateways, it has planar travel, and so provides a way to, send the PCs out. And also in terms of getting them involved, it's a hook. The adventurers want to adventure, a job comes in, they send them out. I also included the Gixo Goblins. I created these for a campaign a while back. They have a backstory of the original goblins were, saw how dangerous adventurers were and thought, hey, it'd be better to be cooperating with these murder hobos than being murdered. And they work by selling their services, so gathering intel, etc., and scouting for adventurers. And this can provide like a hook into adventurers or provide them with information that could be useful. Now, kind of the thing that allows the adventurers to adventure is the Adventurers Guild. I've got in the adventure the means for joining it. Pretty straightforward. They pay a tiny application fee, and then the guild has a ranking system, one that can be either based on the tiers of the official tiers of D&D, which are essentially 4 tiers from levels 1 to 4, 5 to 10, 11 to 16, 17 to 20. And of course, in world, creatures generally don't know about like levels. They don't talk about, the player character as the character doesn't say, I'm like 5th level. But in this world, the creatures would have a gauge of how strong things are. They would notice that after doing a lot of murder hobering, that a fighter would be better at stabbing things, for example, or that certain monsters are tougher. And so that provides a way kind of in game of, without breaking like immersion, talking about challenges. Like the job could be, say, like a silver level job, which would mean that it's 5 to 10, kind of challenging, perhaps very challenging for 5th level, but easy for 10th level. The guild, of course, has got rules and procedures, essentially to provide a bit of realism to it, because they're trying to stay neutral, and this, as a tool for adventure, allows the guild to send adventurers like anywhere. So the question might be like, why is a country willing to allow adventurers from somewhere else to teleport in to one of their like temples or something to go and do adventure? Well, because the guild has strict rules enforcing this. It's kind of like, to use a modern example, with NGOs, like Doctors Without Borders, for example. They're often accepted most places because they're neutral. They're not there to do, they're there to do good things, and they're neutral. They're not there to advance, one nation's political agenda. And likewise, adventurers, they can go someplace. And although adventurers are obviously there to murder hobo, they can be doing murder hoboing in a way that's beneficial to like that area. So that provides a means for, gosh, why does my adventurer get to go like all these places when the countries might be political enemies? And so that provides it if you're concerned about that kind of realism. And the guild provides various benefits. Kind of puts in the background, unless you really like doing all the tracking of, repairing, etc. You can assume that it takes care of things. Provides the PCs with facilities for doing, their research, repairs, etc. as part of their membership. It buys stuff. They even have, lawyers in areas where law is accepted. And this can be kind of like a precursor, if you're playing the new Bastion rules, provides kind of a precursor to that, a means of kind of bastioning without having a bastion. And there's of course the interesting thing to be if you're using the Bastion rules is that maybe as the PCs go up in level, one of their guilds becomes the Adventuring Guild, which they have an option in there, and they could have their own, guild halt, and they could have, kind of as a background, they could have other adventurers going out and doing stuff, which could lead to other adventures. That adventuring party vanishes, and that's the tie-in. Any of the adventures I write could work like that. Like another group goes out to do this, they never come back, and so the PCs have to find out what happened. So in this particular adventure, this is the starter. This is if you're just starting up a campaign, this is a good one to use. And also, if you have players who've never played before, it's got a good intro to the game, because when the setup is the PCs, starting off at first level, and they're getting evaluated to join the guild. So the first thing they'll do after some role playing, joining the guild, is they go through this basic evaluation dungeon, and they're this is a bit of like being a bit hopefully slightly humorous, is that there's there's an evaluator with a clipboard assessing them based on like courage, caution, planning, teamwork, tactics, perception, effectiveness, and of course violence and looting. And the scale was originally 1 to 10, but because of an unfortunate incident, there's now a -1 on that scale. And then perhaps your player characters can bring that down to like maybe a -5 or -10. The evaluation dungeon is pretty short. It's designed intentionally to let new players kind of go through and get a feel for mechanics, and players who are familiar, it may be like fun, a bit fun for them to do kind of like the a bit of a very basic dungeon. And so the layout is got the stairs going down. This is a small map in the actual adventure on available in DM's Guild. Pay what you want. You can want to pay nothing. Bigger maps as well, and also included with the zip file, and also in the document itself. So the layout provides the player characters with a chance to test some of their skills. There's various things to search. There's various mostly harmless traps to get newer players a chance to see what traps are like without getting killed. For example, there's the corridor padded pit where they can fall in, and it doesn't actually, instead of falling on spikes, they fall on something that is not, going to hurt them. And then some, like a lock needle that doesn't actually, poison them or kill them. A shock slug that gives them a little bit of a shock. Blunt treasure chest blades, more padded pits, like a little tiny mini glyph instead of a glyph of warring that may just like blow them up. It gives them a little bit of a zap to teach them some caution. And of course, a statue in there to teach them that in many adventurers, statues are not to be trusted. And there's an evaluation officer put in there. You can play the evaluation officer. I intend to play them seriously, but also somewhat humorously. Making comments on their poor performance, or making good comments on their good performance. And again, if you like kind of like a humorous element, the evaluation officer could be a good source of this. Sort of looking at what they do and their antics. If the one player character starts setting the whole dungeon on fire, they might comment on that interesting approach, but to handling dungeons. There'll also be a combat encounter with a savage swarm of sewer rats, with the evaluator there in case somehow the player characters get overcome. Should be a pretty easy fight. It's their challenge rating 1/4, and so if you have 4 characters there, they should have no problem. But of course, things can go wrong. In which case, it's good to have the evaluating officer there to potentially save them. Then once they complete their test dungeon, they'll become, assuming they survive, become members of the guild, and then they'll be set off on their next adventure. Now, the original plan in this case is, since it's called an unexpected adventure, the plan is they're supposed to go to a town and deal with a giant spider. There's been some horses and killed by the spider, and it seems like a simple job. 50 gold piece reward, go fight spider. But then, of course, things go wrong. The teleportation, there's this magical disruption in which the teleportation fails. And original AD&D had a pretty nasty teleportation failure, and even current 5e does have teleportation failure. So this is something that can happen in the game. But in this case, it's depending on how you want to run the campaign. In my version, it's like an intentional attack against trying to disrupt the teleportation system of the guild, or you could just have it just as a failure. And so instead of going where they're supposed to go, the players get thrown into the unexpected dungeon. In this case, it's the ruins of an ancient complex in my campaign world, a complex created by the first material consciousness species, the ancient Dursatai. And they of course have a terrible and tragic fate, as revealed in other adventures I've written. And so when they arrive in a teleportation chamber and find themselves being attacked by skeletons. Because the Dursatai, the short version is they're in my campaign world, they're the ones who created undead. They did not intend to create this plague, but they did end up creating the undead, and so they're ancient complexes, typically haunted with undead. So, not surprisingly, player characters end up fighting some undead. There's also a friendly NPC, a construct. The Dursatai also, in their experiments, created intelligent constructs, and this friendly NPC, unless the players decide to murder hobo him, is Gelthic the Sculptor, and he will provide them with some useful items, a guide stone to help them get out of the dungeon, as well as some other items that are useful. The dungeon encounters are mostly fighting some few minor undead in there, and then assuming they don't try to murder hobo Gelthic, he'll give them the guide stone that will lead them out to the surface, or they can just kind of wander on their own if they do some murder hoboing. Leading into the next encounters, so these are all my adventures always include the stats for them, because as a matter of convenience, I like being able to just have stuff I can, instead of saying like having to go and flip through the monster manual or something, I like having the stats right there. And since my adventures are always like pay what you want, I feel fine like putting that in there, because you can decide, okay, there's a lot of stats in there, but it's worth it. I'll pay for the adventure and not for the stats. And also, I do create, most of my monsters are custom made. I like making monsters, and so many of them. Another reason why I include the stats is not just convenience for me. That's how I like it, but also because you need the stats, because I pretty much have new monsters every adventure. And one of the new ones in here is the Os Magicum, which I'm probably mispronouncing because I'm bad at even my own made up words. And they're essentially skeletons with some minor casting ability. And of course, the stats for Gelthik the Sculptor, a free-willed, intelligent construct. The next step is once the players' characters get out of the rune complex, they're being led by their guide stone up to the surface, and there'll be a shaft that they'll climb up. There's a risk they could perhaps fall down if they're really make lots of bad choices, and of course there are things in the shaft to fight. Now, in the case of this, there are these flying jellies, which are flying jellyfish, essentially. They're oozes inflated with this air, of course, magical, of course, flying around, and they're predators. So they'll attack the player characters, of course, and love to fight the jellies. This leads up next into the jelly caverns, and these caverns are, there's a map for this as well, and then the PCs will emerge here and then proceed through the cavern. The green stuff isn't green slime in this case, although they may think it is. It's stagnant water, but it's always good to have a little ooze and slime there to teach the players caution. So if you want to, you could throw in some green slime, because who doesn't like green slime? The jelly caverns encounter is with a white jelly, which is a blob, and I designed them to be kind of unpleasant. Their deal is they climb around on the ceilings and with spider climb, and then they drop off and they get a bite attack. And the nasty thing they do is they can essentially engulf a limb, or super now. This is kind of like the Executioner's Hood from the ancient Fiend Folio. They can drop on people's heads and start chewing them up. And so these things, even though they're CR 1/4, they're designed to be kind of scary and unpleasant. And having something drop on their heads and try to murder them should be an interesting fight for the PCs. Once they get out of the cave, they'll be heading towards hopefully an escape route. Gelthik will tell them that he'd heard that above there was a community of gnomes, and they had a magical means of teleporting, and so they'll give the PCs hopefully a clue that they should go there. The gnomes met a terrible fate, and the communities was destroyed, and all that's left is the bone gnomes and the ruins. So there are gnome skeletons there that are full of undeath and anger. There's the basic gnome skeletons that are there to do some stabbing, and they have a leader, Fizzle Kizzle. Yeah, one of my friend Ron says that I make my names the Scrabble method, just pulling out things and just making up names, and yeah, that's probably true. And Fizzle Kizzle is a spellcaster, undead, and he'll try to Fizzle Kizzle the players. Now, since the piece intelligent, there is a chance they could talk to them, but my players are often divided. I have some players who want to talk to everybody, and then other players just want to murder everybody. And so there's some conflict there. The adventure concludes when the PCs deal with the gnomes, either killing them or talking to them, and then are able to activate the teleportation circle and return back to the guild safely. I also, in addition to creating my own monsters, I also like to create a lot of new magic items, typically minor stuff. The PCs, if they don't murder Gelthik, will get a death surrogate that's essentially help them not die. A guide stone, which will be useful for that, getting up to the surface. Also potentially a life coach, which can help them. These two items, death surrogate and life coach, are intended to help deal with the challenge of being first level, being when you have say 6 hit points or 10 or even 12. There's a good chance you can get taken down with 1 or 2 relatively small shots. And so the Death Surrogate and Life Coach was my intent to enable the PCs to be a bit more, survivability. And the other item they can get is the Oz Magicum's Ulna. I'm also going way back to when I ran AD&D. I've always had the idea of there being monster pieces that could be used as magic items, especially if undead and constructs where the magic is kind of built into them, and you could grab a chunk of them and use it in some manner. And so that continues that tradition. So that's the adventure. Here's bigger versions of the maps, and pretty straightforward. But again, this is kind of my experiment in will a video prep be useful for remembering this stuff when I get around to running this. And if you as a dungeon master find this useful, let me know. As a closing thing, you maybe wondered, like, why do I do this? Because if you look at my numbers on YouTube, my best video I think is like a couple hundred, but most of them around like 25. And obviously, it's not monetized at all. And the reason why I do this is because I like doing it. When I run my game, I'm running it for currently like 7 people. So I consider, hey, if 7 people look at something, success. Also, as a professor, if I teach a class, my classes are typically 35 people enrolled. And so if I'm used to talking to a relatively small number of people. So from my standpoint, by the algorithm and the financial success, of course, my channel is doing catastrophically. I should probably just give up and delete it. But I'm not here for the money, and I'm in a sense not really here for the views. I just like when I teach, I go in, I'd have 30 students or maybe 20 show up. I still teach. When I run my game, I'm running it for a few people. If I have office hours, talking to 1 student. So I don't measure the value of what I do based on the number of views on it or the money pouring in, because I'm professor. I chose academics, so mostly it's about creating stuff, be it philosophy or gaming stuff, and putting it out there to share with people who find it interesting. And if only a few people find it interesting, that's still good. Just like teaching or holding office hours. It's not the numbers that are critical. It's the value of what is actually done. And not to dismiss or I'm not trying to throw shade on people who are building these amazing channels and they get hundreds of thousands of views and are super popular and good for. I like those channels too. They're very entertaining. They do a great job. They are skilled performers. And what they do, that is good. And they're good at what they do, and I am adequate at what I do. So anyways, if you're watching this, obviously, if you can hear me, thanks for looking at it. I hope you're getting something useful out of this. So stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.